I had spent months planning the trip of a lifetime to Italy, a reward for finishing school and working hard to graduate. But just days before I was set to leave, my sister handed me a ruined passport and a flimsy excuse. Instead of wandering the streets of Rome, I was stuck babysitting her kids while she and her husband jetted off on vacation. What she didn't know was that I had a plan of my own, and when I exposed her, my dad did something that shocked everyone, including me. Graduating from college had been the proudest moment of my life. After years of hard work, sleepless nights, and juggling part-time jobs, I had finally crossed the stage to receive my diploma. But for me, graduation wasn't just an ending, it was the gateway to a long-dreamed adventure. For as long as I could remember, I had wanted to visit Italy. The idea of wandering through the ancient streets of Rome, indulging in gelato by the canals of Venice, and marveling at Michelangelo's masterpieces in Florence felt like the perfect way to celebrate this milestone. It was a dream born from years of reading travel guides, watching documentaries, and imagining myself in a world so different from my own. To make it happen, I saved every spare dollar I could. I skipped nights out with friends, lived off instant noodles more often than I cared to admit, and cut back on everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Slowly but surely, my travel fund grew, and by the time graduation rolled around, I had enough to turn my dream into reality. I threw myself into planning. My passport was ready months in advance, my flights and accommodations were booked, and I had even mapped out an itinerary that included everything from small-town wine tastings to a visit to Pompeii. My excitement was palpable. Every day brought me closer to the adventure of a lifetime. My family had always been supportive, or so I thought. My parents beamed with pride when I told them about my plans, happy to see me doing something for myself after working so hard for so long. My sister, Anna, had also congratulated me, though her reactions were a little more lukewarm. "You're so lucky," she'd say, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "I can't even imagine taking a trip like that with kids." I brushed it off at first. Anna's life was hectic. 2 kids under 10, and a husband who worked long hours didn't leave her much time for herself. I figured her comments were more about her own frustrations than anything directed at me. Still, there were moments when her tone felt off, like she was less happy for me and more resentful. I ignored the little red flags, too wrapped up in my own excitement to consider that her feelings might become a problem. After all, Anna had never been anything but loving and supportive. Why would she change now? The days leading up to my trip were a whirlwind of preparations. I bought a new suitcase, printed out all my travel documents, and even brushed up on a little Italian with the help of an app, Grazie, and Davi il Bagno. Might not have been much, but it felt good to at least try. I told Anna about my itinerary one afternoon when she stopped by with her kids. She smiled as I described my plans, but quickly changed the subject to how much she and her husband, Mark, needed a vacation. "It's been years since we've done anything just for us," she sighed. "Sometimes I wish I could just drop everything and go." Her words lingered in my mind after she left, but I pushed them aside, focusing instead on my excitement. I was finally going to do something for myself, something that didn't involve compromise or sacrifice. Little did I know, Anna had other plans in mind, and they didn't include me enjoying my dream trip. At the time, I couldn't have imagined what was coming. My passport was ready, my tickets were booked, and my bags were practically packed. Italy was calling, and I was ready to answer. Or so I thought. 3 days before my flight, I was in full pre-travel mode. My suitcase was open on the bed, slowly filling with carefully folded clothes, travel-sized toiletries, and the books I had been saving for my long-awaited Italian getaway. My excitement was at its peak. Just a few days more, and I'd be on a plane, leaving behind the grind of daily life for cobblestone streets and breathtaking views. That evening, Anna called and said she wanted to stop by with a few things to help me prepare for my trip. "I've got some travel gear lying around you might find useful," she said cheerfully. "And a few leftover euros from our last trip. You could use them for snacks or tips when you land." I thought it was a kind gesture, though unusual. Anna wasn't normally the type to go out of her way like this, especially with her kids, keeping her so busy. Still, I didn't think much of it. When she arrived, she had a small bag in hand. Inside was a travel adapter, a couple of guidebooks, and an envelope with what she claimed were leftover euros. "I'm so jealous you're going to Italy," she said wistfully, sitting at my kitchen table. "You're going to have the time of your life." Her words seemed genuine, and I felt a pang of guilt for thinking her previous comments had been tinged with jealousy. We chatted for a bit before she left, wishing me a safe trip and promising to call when I got back to hear all about it. Later that night, as I went through my travel documents to ensure everything was in order, my heart dropped. My passport, which had been sitting neatly on my desk just that morning, was ruined. The cover was warped, the pages were wrinkled and torn, and ink bled across the stamps and personal details. It looked as though it had been submerged in water and left to dry in the worst way possible. I stared at it in disbelief, my mind racing. How could this have happened? I had been so careful to keep it safe. My flight was just days away. There was no way I could get a new passport in time. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and called Anna, desperate for advice. She answered on the third ring, her voice calm and sweet. "Anna, my passport is ruined," I blurted out, holding back tears. "It's completely unusable. I don't even know how this happened." "Oh no, that's terrible," she said, her tone filled with exaggerated concern. "Maybe you left it near some water? Or did you spill something on it without realizing?" Her response made me pause. I hadn't left it near water, and I definitely hadn't spilled anything. I had been meticulous about keeping it safe, knowing how crucial it was for my trip. Her calm demeanor fell off, like she wasn't nearly as concerned as I was. "I don't think so," I replied, trying to piece things together. "It was fine this morning, and now it's ruined. Completely." Anna sighed, her voice still unnervingly even. "Well, that's awful timing. I guess you'll have to reschedule your trip, won't you?" There was something in her tone, a smugness just barely hidden beneath the surface. It wasn't the kind of reaction I'd expect from someone who should have been devastated on my behalf. My stomach churned as doubt crept in. "Maybe," I said, my voice quiet. "I'll have to see what I can do." "Well, let me know if you need anything," she said, her tone light. "Good luck with everything." As I hung up, her words replayed in my mind. The way she'd said, "That's awful timing, and you'll have to reschedule," felt rehearsed, almost as if she'd known this would happen. The realization hit me like a punch. She had been in my apartment earlier that day. My passport had been fine before she arrived. Could she have done something to it? At first, I dismissed the thought as paranoia. Anna was my sister. She wouldn't sabotage me, would she? But the more I thought about it, the more her recent behavior made sense. The jealousy in her comments, the oddly timed, helpful visit, her unnervingly calm reaction when I told her about the ruined passport, it all pointed to one conclusion. Something didn't add up, and the pit in my stomach told me I was about to uncover a betrayal I never expected. The morning after I discovered my ruined passport, I was up at dawn, desperately trying to find a solution. I scoured government websites, called Expedited Passport Services, and even considered driving to a nearby city to plead my case at a passport office. But every option ended the same way. It was impossible to replace my passport in time. By noon, the reality of the situation hit me. My trip to Italy, the one I had dreamed of and worked so hard to plan, wasn't happening. The disappointment was crushing. I sat on my bed, staring at my half-packed suitcase, trying to process what felt like the biggest letdown of my life. As I was wallowing in my heartbreak, my phone buzzed. It was Anna. "Hey," she said, her voice unnervingly cheerful. "How's it going? Did you figure out the passport thing?" "No," I replied flatly. "There's no way to fix it in time. I had to cancel everything." "Oh no, that's awful," she said, though her tone betrayed no real sympathy. "I can't imagine how disappointing that must be." There was a pause, just long enough for her to shift gears. "Since you're not going to Italy anymore," she continued, her tone far too casual, "would you mind watching the kids for a few days? Mark and I really need a break. We've been so stressed lately, and this could be the perfect opportunity for us to recharge." Her words stopped me cold. It was as if she'd been waiting for my plans to fall apart so she could swoop in with her request. The timing was too perfect, her tone too rehearsed. My suspicion that she'd sabotaged my trip suddenly felt more like certainty. I don't know, Anna," I said, trying to mask my growing anger. "I just canceled the trip of a lifetime. I don't think babysitting is exactly how I want to spend my time right now." "Oh, come on," she pressed, her voice taking on a slightly manipulative edge. "You love the kids, and it's only for a few days. It would mean so much to us." I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought, to call her out for what I was now sure she had done. But I stopped myself. I didn't have proof yet. If I confronted her now, she would deny everything and paint me as overreacting. So instead, I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll do it." "Thank you," she said, sounding entirely too triumphant. "You're a lifesaver." I'll drop them off tomorrow morning, and Mark and I will head out. As soon as I hung up, the weight of what I'd agreed to sank in. Instead of walking through the streets of Rome or sipping wine in Tuscany, I would be babysitting my niece and nephew while my sister and her husband went on vacation. The realization stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. If Anna thought she could ruin my plans and use me as free childcare without consequences, she was about to learn otherwise. I spent the rest of the day stewing, plotting how I could expose her for what she had done. The next morning, Anna arrived with her kids, looking radiant and relaxed, as though she had no idea I might be angry with her. She handed me a list of instructions, meal preferences, bedtime routines, and emergency contacts, before giving the kids a quick hug and heading out the door with Mark. "Thanks again," she said with a smile that made my blood boil. "We'll see you in a few days." As the door closed behind them, I took a deep breath, trying to push down my frustration. The kids, blissfully unaware of the tension, were already asking if they could watch cartoons and have pancakes for breakfast. For their sake, I put on a brave face and tried to make the best of the situation. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about Anna's smug tone, her carefully timed request, and the nagging feeling that all of this had been orchestrated. I didn't know how or when I would confront her, but I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to get away with this. Not this time. Babysitting Anna's kids was supposed to be a temporary distraction, but instead, it became the perfect opportunity for reflection. Between making snacks and refereeing arguments over toys, I couldn't stop thinking about how neatly everything had fallen into place for Anna and Mark. Their vacation plans had been a complete secret until my trip to Italy was canceled, and now they were jetting off, carefree, while I was stuck at home with their kids. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious it all seemed. Anna's behavior leading up to the ruined passport started to feel less like a coincidence and more like a calculated plan. There were the comments she'd made about how lucky I was to travel, her insistence on dropping by with helpful items for my trip, and the way she'd so casually brushed off my panic when I told her about the damage. It all felt too deliberate, like she had been laying the groundwork for weeks. I replayed the moment I had found my destroyed passport, remembering the smugness in Anna's voice when I'd called her in a panic. At the time, I had convinced myself it was paranoia to suspect her. But now, every interaction felt like another piece of a puzzle I couldn't ignore. As the kids worked on their homework at the kitchen table, I busied myself tidying up their toys and books, my mind racing with possibilities. That's when I noticed Anna's phone sitting on the counter, left behind in her rush to get out the door. It was unlocked, the screen lit up with a few notifications from a group chat and a recent text thread. My heart raced as I hesitated. I knew it was wrong to snoop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers I needed were right there. Taking a deep breath, I tapped on the most recent message, trying to calm the nagging guilt in my chest. It was a conversation with Mark, and as I scrolled, the truth became painfully clear. "Mark, are you sure she'll agree to watch the kids?" "Anna, don't worry. Her passport is ruined, so she's stuck here. Free babysitting. Pack your bags, babe." My hands trembled as I read the text again, the words sinking in like a punch to the gut. There it was, the smoking gun. Anna had sabotaged my passport, knowing it would derail my trip, just so she could use me as free childcare. I scrolled up, finding more damning evidence. Messages about how hard it had been to plan their trip without my knowledge, how perfect the timing was when my passport was ruined, and even a comment about how generous it was of me to cancel my plans to help them out. Generous? I muttered under my breath, the word catching in my throat. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal that made it hard to breathe. One of the kids called my name, breaking my train of thought. "Can we have cookies after dinner?" "Sure," I said automatically, slipping the phone back onto the counter and forcing a smile. My emotions were boiling beneath the surface, but I didn't want the kids to sense anything was wrong. For the rest of the evening, I went through the motions of babysitting, all the while formulating a plan in my mind. Anna thought she had outsmarted me, but she had underestimated how far I would go to expose her betrayal. When the kids were finally asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at Anna's phone as if it held all the answers to my next move. My instincts told me to confront her immediately, but I wanted to do it the right way, with no room for her to weasel out of what she had done. I took screenshots of the incriminating messages and sent them to myself as evidence. I didn't know exactly how I would use them yet, but I wanted to be prepared. As I sat there in the quiet house, the anger that had consumed me earlier began to shift into something else, a sense of resolve. This wasn't just about a ruined passport or a missed trip to Italy anymore. It was about standing up for myself, refusing to let Anna manipulate me, and showing her that actions have consequences. By the time Anna and Mark returned from their vacation, I would be ready. She had no idea what was coming, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. By the time Anna and Mark returned from their vacation, I was running on fumes. Babysitting two energetic kids for several days had taken its toll, and sleepless nights had left me physically exhausted. But none of that compared to the emotional storm brewing inside me. I had replayed the confrontation in my mind over and over, fine-tuning exactly what I would say when they walked through the door. When they finally arrived, they looked like they had stepped out of a travel brochure. Tanned and relaxed, with broad smiles and matching sun hats, they were the picture of a carefree couple. Anna waltzed in first, exclaiming, "Oh, it's so good to be home. How were the kids? I hope they didn't give you too much trouble." I didn't respond immediately, which caught her off guard. Instead, I stood by the kitchen counter, her phone in hand, and let the silence hang in the air. Mark set down their luggage and glanced at me curiously, clearly sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" Anna asked, her smile faltering slightly. I stepped forward, holding up her phone with the incriminating text messages displayed on the screen. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice steady, but laced with anger. Anna's face went pale as she realized what I was showing her. For a moment, she was completely still, her wide eyes darting between me and the phone. I can explain," she stammered, her voice shaky. I let out a bitter laugh. "Explain? Sure. Why don't you explain how my passport got ruined right after you conveniently stopped by? Or how you and Mark planned this entire vacation knowing I'd have to cancel mine? Or, better yet, how you had the audacity to call me your free babysitter while I was scrambling to salvage the trip of a lifetime?" Anna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mark, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "What's going on?" he asked, confused. I turned to him, holding up the phone. "Your wife sabotaged my passport, so I'd be stuck here to watch your kids while you two went on vacation," I said bluntly. "She ruined my plans and lied to my face." Mark's jaw dropped as he looked at Anna, who was now visibly panicked. "Anna, is that true?" he asked, his voice rising. "It's not what it looks like," Anna blurted out, her hands wringing nervously. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. I was desperate. We haven't had a break in years, and when I saw how excited she was about her trip, I thought—" "You thought what?" I interrupted, my voice trembling with anger. "That my hard work and dreams didn't matter? That it was okay to ruin something I've wanted my entire life, just so you could have a vacation? I didn't think you'd find out," she admitted, then immediately clapped her hand over her mouth, realizing how incriminating that sounded. "You didn't think I'd find out?" I repeated incredulously. "That's your defense? You lied, manipulated me, and destroyed my passport, but it's fine because you thought I wouldn't catch you?" Mark stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Anna, this is insane," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "You went too far." Anna turned to him, pleading. "I just wanted some time for us. We needed this trip, and it was the only way." Mark cut her off. "The only way was to ruin her plans? To lie to your own sister?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't done. "Anna, you didn't just ruin my trip. You ruined my trust in you. I've spent years sacrificing for this family, always putting others first. This trip was supposed to be my moment, my reward for everything I've worked for. And you stole that from me?" Tears welled up in Anna's eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said firmly. "You thought I wouldn't find out, but I did. And now everyone else is going to find out too. Mom, Dad, our friends, they're all going to know what you did." Anna's eyes widened in fear. "No, please," she begged. "Don't tell them. I'll make it up to you. I'll do anything. Just don't tell them." I shook my head, my resolve unshaken. "You didn't think about the consequences when you were sabotaging me. Now you'll have to deal with them." The room was thick with tension as I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back to Anna. "You didn't just ruin my dream trip. You ruined our relationship. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that." As I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of anger, relief, and sadness. I had stood up for myself, but the betrayal still stung deeply. Anna had shown me her true colors, and there was no going back. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her win. The fallout from this confrontation was only just beginning, and I was ready to face whatever came next. After walking out of Anna's house, I didn't waste any time. The anger and betrayal coursing through me demanded action. I wasn't going to let this stay between just us. I needed to expose her for what she had done, not out of revenge, but because she deserved to face the consequences of her actions. The first person I called was my mom. I didn't hold back, telling her everything from the ruined passport to the incriminating text messages. Her initial reaction was disbelief. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Anna wouldn't do something like that. She's your sister." "Mom, I saw the text with my own eyes," I replied firmly. She admitted to Mark that she sabotaged me so she could use me as a babysitter. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate plan. My mom was quiet for a moment, and I could tell she was processing what I'd just said. "I can't believe she would do something so selfish," she finally said, her tone tinged with disappointment. "Your dad needs to hear about this." When my dad got on the phone, his reaction was immediate and fiery. Unlike my mom, who tended to avoid conflict, my dad wasn't afraid to call out bad behavior when he saw it. "She sabotaged your passport?" he yelled, his voice booming even through the phone. "That's not just selfish. It's malicious." I could feel his anger radiating through the line, and for the first time since this whole ordeal started, I felt a flicker of validation. My dad had always doted on Anna, often favoring her as the eldest sibling, but this time, he was firmly on my side. That weekend, my parents invited the entire family over for dinner. It wasn't unusual for us to gather like this, but the tension in the air was palpable. Anna arrived with Mark, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something more cautious. She must have sensed that something was off. Halfway through dinner, my dad put down his fork and cleared his throat. "We need to talk about something," he said, his voice serious. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. I glanced at Anna, whose face immediately stiffened. She knew what was coming. "Your sister told us what happened," my dad said, looking directly at Anna. "The sabotaged passport, the texts, the babysitting plan, it all points to you. What do you have to say for yourself?" Anna's eyes darted between me and my dad, panic flashing across her face. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't mean to ruin her trip. It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" my dad repeated, his voice rising. "You destroyed her passport and then had the nerve to use her as free childcare while you went on vacation. How is that a misunderstanding?" Anna stammered, trying to explain herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. I had printed out screenshots of the text messages and handed them to my dad before dinner. He held them up now, waving them in the air for everyone to see. "You admitted it in your own words," he said, his tone sharp. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Mark, who had been sitting quietly up to this point, finally spoke up. "I didn't know she actually sabotaged the passport," he said, his voice low. "I thought it was just bad timing." Anna shot him a look, but the damage was done. The room erupted into chaos as everyone began talking at once. My mom tried to calm things down, but my dad wasn't finished. "You ruined your sister's dream for what?" he shouted. "A free babysitter? How selfish can you be?" Anna's face crumpled as the weight of his words sank in. For the first time, she looked genuinely remorseful, but it was too late. The damage was done. Word spread quickly through our extended family. My parents didn't go out of their way to broadcast what happened, but family gossip travels fast, and soon everyone knew the truth. Anna, who had always played the role of the responsible older sibling, now found herself facing judgment from relatives who had once admired her. "I can't believe Anna would do something like that," one cousin said during a phone call. "She's always been so put together. What was she thinking?" "She wasn't thinking," I replied. "She was only thinking about herself." As the fallout continued, I began to feel a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that everyone finally saw Anna for who she really was. On the other hand, it was painful to see our family dynamic unraveling because of her actions. Anna tried to reach out to me a few times, sending apologetic texts and leaving voicemails asking to meet up and talk. But I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet. For so long, she had taken advantage of me, assuming I would always put family first, no matter the cost to myself. But now, she was learning a hard lesson. Actions have consequences, and some bridges, once burned, can't be easily rebuilt. The exposure had shattered the image Anna had carefully cultivated for years, and while I wasn't happy to see her struggle, I couldn't deny the sense of justice I felt. She had tried to ruin my dream, but in the end, She had only ruined herself. In the week following the family dinner, things between Anna and me remained tense. She avoided direct contact, leaving a trail of half-hearted apologies in text messages that I didn't bother responding to. Every time her name came up in conversation, my dad's jaw would tighten, and my mom would sigh heavily. The betrayal had left a mark on all of us, and it felt like nothing would ever be the same. Then one evening, my dad called me into his home office. It was a place I had rarely been invited to, his private sanctuary where important decisions were made. As I stepped inside, I noticed an envelope sitting neatly on his desk. "Close the door," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. I did as he asked, my stomach twisting with nerves. Dad had been unusually quiet since the confrontation with Anna, and I wasn't sure what to expect. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he began. "And about what Anna did to you." I nodded, unsure of where he was going with this. "I want you to know how proud I am of you," he continued. "You've worked so hard, and you deserve that trip. Anna had no right to take that away from you. What she did was selfish and unacceptable, and I don't want you to think for a second that your family isn't behind you." Tears welled up in my eyes as his words sank in. Dad wasn't one for emotional speeches, so hearing him express his pride and support meant more than I could put into words. He reached for the envelope on his desk and slid it across to me. "This is for you," he said simply. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside was a plane ticket to Italy, along with a handwritten letter in my dad's neat, precise handwriting. The ticket was for flight departing in 2 weeks, giving me just enough time to prepare for the trip I thought I'd lost forever. The letter was short, but heartfelt. It explained that he had used his savings to cover the costs I'd incurred from canceling my original plans. He promised to take care of everything, including ensuring that Anna paid back every cent she had cost me. "You deserve this trip," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You've earned it, and I'll deal with Anna. She'll be paying me back, whether she likes it or not." For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. My dad had always been a fair man, but I never expected him to go to such lengths to make things right. Finally, the dam broke, and tears streamed down my face. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "I don't even know what to say. This means everything to me." He smiled, his expression softening. "You've always been there for this family," he said. "It's time we showed up for you." In the days that followed, Dad held true to his word. He called Anna over for a private conversation, and while I wasn't privy to the details, I heard enough to know it wasn't pleasant. My mom told me later that Dad had laid down the law, insisting that Anna repay every dollar of the money he'd spent to replace my trip. "She's lucky that's all he's asking for," Mom added. "I think he's angrier about how she hurt you than about the money." Knowing that Dad had my back in such a powerful way was a kind of validation I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like justice had been served. Anna might not fully understand the consequences of her actions yet, but I did, and it was enough to know that I wouldn't be the one left to pick up the pieces. As I started preparing for my rescheduled trip, a sense of excitement began to replace the bitterness I had been carrying. Italy was back within reach, and this time, I wasn't going to let anything or anyone get in the way. When I boarded that plane 2 weeks later, I carried not just the anticipation of a dream fulfilled, but also the knowledge that I had a family willing to stand up for me when it mattered most. It was a feeling of justice, love, and pride that stayed with me every step of the way. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Anna and the incredible gesture from my dad, I found myself sitting in the window seat of a plane, watching the clouds roll by as we soared over the Atlantic. My new passport was safely tucked into my bag, along with the rescheduled itinerary and a journal I'd bought to document every moment of a trip. As the plane descended into Rome, a rush of emotions swept over me. Excitement, relief, and a sense of triumph I couldn't quite put into words. Stepping off the plane, I felt like I had won a battle not just against Anna's betrayal but against the doubts and insecurities that had lingered from years of always putting others first. My first day in Rome was a whirlwind of exploration. I wandered through the cobblestone streets, marveling at the towering columns of the Colosseum and the intricate carvings of the Roman Forum. The weight of history surrounded me, and for the first time in months, I felt a lightness in my heart that I hadn't thought possible. The next few days unfolded like a dream. I visited the Vatican, standing in awe beneath the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the vibrant colors and delicate details leaving me speechless. I indulged in endless bowls of pasta, rich with flavors that made me wonder if I'd ever be able to eat Italian food at home again. Every corner I turned seemed to reveal another breathtaking view, another story waiting to be discovered. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the Spanish Steps, eating gelato and people watching as the city buzzed around me. The warm sun on my face and the sweet taste of hazelnut and chocolate brought a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a vacation, it was a reclamation of everything I had worked for and deserved. Florence was next on my itinerary, and it did not disappoint. The Duomo rose above the city, like a masterpiece carved from the heavens, its intricate facade glowing in the sunlight. I wandered through the Uffizi Gallery, standing inches away from works by Botticelli and Da Vinci, their artistry stirring something deep within me. But my favorite part of Florence was the quiet moments, sipping espresso in a tiny cafe, watching the Arno River shimmer under the setting sun, and getting lost in the narrow streets that seemed to twist and turn with no destination in mind. Each of these moments felt like a small victory, not just over Anna, but over the part of me that had doubted whether I deserved this trip in the first place. As I traveled north to Venice, I was struck by the city's otherworldly beauty. The canals reflected the soft pinks and blues of the sky, and the gondolas drifted lazily through the water, carrying tourists who, like me, were enchanted by the magic of it all. I treated myself to a gondola ride, the lapping of the water and the soft melodies of the gondolier creating a moment I knew I'd never forget. Every day in Italy felt like a celebration of resilience and self-discovery. I had worked so hard to make this trip happen, and even though it had nearly been stolen from me, I had fought to reclaim it. With every bite of pizza, every ancient ruin, and every sunset that painted the sky, I reminded myself that I was worthy of this joy. The trip wasn't just about seeing a beautiful country. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the betrayal and heartbreak that had tried to hold me back. It was about rediscovering my own strength and learning to trust myself again. By the time I boarded the plane back home, my journal was filled with sketches and notes, each one capturing a memory I knew I'd treasure forever. I felt like a different person, someone who had faced adversity and come out stronger on the other side. Italy had been everything I dreamed it would be and more. But what made the trip truly unforgettable was knowing that I had earned every single moment of it. Returning home from Italy felt like waking up from a vivid dream, but the memories were still fresh in my mind. As the plane touched down, I realized that while my trip had been a transformative experience, the true growth came from what I had learned about myself and the people in my life. The first thing I noticed upon my return was how much lighter I felt, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. Italy had given me more than stunning views and incredible meals. It had given me perspective. For the first time, I saw my relationship with Anna for what it truly was, a one-sided dynamic where I was expected to bend over backward to keep the peace, no matter the cost to myself. That realization hit harder than I expected. I had spent years putting her needs ahead of my own, brushing off her occasional selfishness as just part of her personality. But the passport sabotage had forced me to confront the truth. Anna's actions weren't just careless. They were calculated. She had taken advantage of me, and for far too long, I had let her.
It was time for that to change.
Setting boundaries with Anna wasn't easy, especially when she tried to act as if nothing had happened. "So, how was your trip?" she asked one afternoon when she called unexpectedly, her tone overly cheerful. "It was amazing," I replied curtly, keeping my answers short and polite. I could sense her fishing for details, probably hoping to steer the conversation back to herself, but I didn't let her. When she finally said, "We should get together soon," like old times, I felt a pang of sadness. I wanted to believe things could go back to the way they were before, but I knew better. Instead of agreeing, I said, "I think we need some space right now. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine." She was silent for a moment before mumbling, "Okay, if that's how you feel." Her tone was defensive, but I didn't let it affect me. For the first time, I wasn't sacrificing my own well-being to protect her feelings, and it was liberating. My relationship with Anna remained strained in the months that followed, but surprisingly, it didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. I no longer felt obligated to prioritize her, and that freedom allowed me to focus on the people who truly supported me, like my dad, whose unwavering belief in me had been a beacon during one of the darkest moments of my life. Dad and I grew closer after the Italy trip. We started meeting for weekly coffee dates, something we hadn't done since I was a teenager. During those conversations, he reminded me that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. "You've always been strong," he said one morning over lattes. "You just needed a push to realize it." His words stayed with me, bolstering my confidence as I navigated life with a newfound sense of self-worth. My mom, too, was a steady source of encouragement. She expressed her disappointment in Anna's behavior but assured me that I wasn't alone in this. "Family doesn't mean you have to accept being treated unfairly," she said. "You deserve respect, and it's okay to demand it." Beyond my family, I began to notice how my personal growth spilled into other areas of my life. I was more assertive at work, taking on projects I would have shied away from before. I said no to things that didn't serve me, whether it was social events I didn't want to attend or obligations I had previously felt guilt into accepting. Most importantly, I learned to embrace the discomfort that came with standing up for myself. It wasn't easy to say no to Anna or to confront her about her actions, but the strength I gained from those moments far outweighed the temporary unease. Italy had been a journey of discovery, but the real victory was in what I brought back with me, a sense of clarity about who I was and what I deserved. I no longer felt the need to explain myself or justify my boundaries. If Anna didn't understand or respect them, that was her choice. My responsibility was to myself, to protect my peace, nurture my happiness, and prioritize the relationships that brought out the best in me. Looking back, I realized that standing up to Anna wasn't just about exposing her betrayal. It was about reclaiming my voice and refusing to let anyone else define my worth. And as I stood in my apartment one evening, surrounded by mementos from my trip, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I had learned, for the people who had stood by me, and for the strength I had found within myself. Most of all, I was grateful for the realization that my happiness was worth fighting for, and that I had finally learned how to fight for it. Standing in my freshly redecorated apartment, I felt a wave of pride and contentment that was hard to put into words. The space around me wasn't just a collection of furniture and decor, it was a reflection of the journey I had been on, a testament to how far I had come. The framed photographs from Italy on the walls told stories of resilience and triumph. One showed me standing in front of the Colosseum, grinning despite the sweltering heat. Another captured the golden glow of a Venetian sunset, its light spilling across the canals like liquid fire. These weren't just travel souvenirs. They were symbols of a dream reclaimed, proof that I had fought for what I deserved and won. But this journey wasn't just about Italy. It was about rediscovering my voice, my strength, and my worth. Anna's betrayal had hurt deeply, but it had also been a turning point. It forced me to confront the ways I had allowed others to take advantage of me, to see how I had placed their needs above my own time and time again. In a strange way, I was grateful for what had happened. If Anna hadn't sabotaged my trip, I might never have learned the importance of standing up for myself. Her actions had been a wake-up call, a painful one, but necessary. It wasn't just about the passport or the babysitting or the lies. It was about breaking a pattern of behavior that had left me drained and resentful for years. The lessons I'd learned extended beyond my relationship with Anna. I had realized that setting boundaries wasn't just important, it was essential. For too long, I had equated saying yes with being a good person, as if my worth was tied to how much I could give to others. But now, I understood that saying no was an act of self-respect. My dad's gesture had also taught me something profound. Even in the face of betrayal, there are people who will stand by you, who will fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. His unwavering support reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had a family that valued me and wanted to see me thrive. Our weekly coffee dates had become a cherished ritual, and I found myself looking forward to those moments of connection. Dad always had a way of grounding me, of reminding me of my own strength when I needed it most. As for Anna, our relationship was still strained. She had tried a few more times to reach out, but I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I wasn't sure I ever would. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something I owed her. It was something I would offer only if and when I was ready. For now, I was focused on moving forward. I had started taking art classes at a local studio, rekindling a passion for painting that I hadn't pursued since high school. I was exploring new friendships, deepening old ones, and embracing the freedom that came with prioritizing my own happiness. Work, too, had taken on a new energy. I felt more confident, more willing to take risks and assert myself in ways I hadn't before. The same resilience that had carried me through the ordeal with Anna now fueled my career, propelling me toward opportunities one once might have shied away from. Standing in my apartment that evening, I lit a candle and poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the quiet joy of a life that finally felt like my own. This space, this moment, it was a culmination of everything I had fought for, everything I had discovered about myself. Anna's betrayal might have been the spark, but it was my resilience, my determination, and my courage that had carried me through. I had chosen myself, and for the first time, I truly understood the power of that choice. As I sat on the couch, flipping through my journal from Italy, I couldn't help but smile. The journey wasn't over. Far from it. But I was ready for whatever came next, armed with the lessons I had learned and the knowledge that I was capable of facing anything. In the end, I had reclaimed more than just a dream trip. I had reclaimed my voice, my worth, and my belief in myself. And as I looked around the room, the future felt wide open, filled with possibilities I couldn't wait to explore. I had chosen myself, and I wouldn't have it any other way.